Hello, everyone. We're very lucky today to have a guest speaker, Benoit Adelus. He is the chairman and chief executive officer of Sebia, and previously has been the CEO of a very important firm, which is Buyout, leader in the diagnostic industry. And so I would like just to thank Benoit to be with us today. Benoit?
Yes, hello everybody, and thank you for inviting me to this MOOC.
Thank you. So now what we will do, we'll be having also with us today, we have, I should say hello to our team, Romain, Antoine, and Vanessa. So this live session is possible thanks to them. So thank you very much, guys. And in terms of the agenda, so what we'll be doing, it's a short update of week 2, reminding you just to fill in the peer assessments and then discuss some of your questions from the forum. And then directly we move on to questions to Benoit and your questions on the forum. Romain, Antoine, and Vanessa, we are all here just actually to relay your questions to Benoit. So far, we've been 15,000 learners to join the movement. That's just superb. 180 countries almost, 40% from emerging economies, 60% male, 40% female, and 2/3 are not students but people working or having a professional occupation. So that's superb. Let me move directly to the questions with some of the quiz questions that were maybe difficult. So the first one was the difference between Red Cross and actually Doctors Without Borders. What we wanted to convey here with this question is that actually they were following the same logic, non-profit organizations, non-governmental organizations, and that that was the nuance we wanted to introduce. And you see that there was like confusion with the fact that they with the first answer here. So the right answer was despite sharing the same logic of action, organization define their ends and means differently, and therefore that's why they had different behaviors. Another question where actually the answers were not completely correct. When an organization you support become illegitimate to many other people, the right answer was your world is disorganized. But the second answer, as you can see, was also possible in a sense, also less precise. So that's why the first answer was the right one. So sorry if this question was not so well spelled out. Peer assessment, this is the end of week 2 and the beginning of week 3. So remember, don't forget actually to submit your the question or the situation you're facing or you want to discuss with us, and don't forget also just to assess the peers actually situations that they have sent. You need to evaluate 5 of your peers to get the max score. So now I would like just to take some questions from the forum. So the first question is a question from Ksenia Dementievskaya. I wonder whether some individuals have more influence on organization and its logic of actions, like CEOs, board of directors, and how this is viewed by the prism of orgology. So here, what I would say is that yes, that's true. Some people have more power or influence in an organization, and this is what we will see in week number 4, where actually we'll be, raising some questions for you and helping you map out where you locate yourself vis-a-vis the organization, vis-a-vis the ones who have the in a sense the power or more power than you. And so the question we'll be asking would be, would you like to engage more? Would you like to resist some of this decision? Keeping in mind that any organization actually is kind of a negotiated order, and that although some people have more power, this negotiation between the different forces inside the organization can change over time. And this is also the kind of the role of management, just to foster these changes. There's a question from Elizabeth Osaid, and I think actually we will keep this question because I think it's just a perfect question to Benoit. And so we keep this question for the time being, and we will just ask it just later in a second. Then a question from Juan Rivera Rodriguez. How could the analytical tools provided by the ergology approach help understand the question of organization within organizations? And I think that this is a very interesting question that here is asked. And that's true that through merger and acquisitions, you can see that different entities are grouped together and sometimes not having exactly the same logics of action. And so I would say this is an inherent issue for management, how to make these parts cohere. And another answer to this is that actually it doesn't succeed every time. So it can be actually, this can exactly be the result of this situation can be that actually you need to split the organization, to break it down and spin off it, for instance. Another question, which is actually around the same line, this time is not an entity within a bigger organization, it's actually the case of individuals. Armando Cliento says, I'm curious to know how ergology classify organizations that are wholly represented by one single individual. Let's think of freelancer or self-employed professionals. How logic of action mirroring an individual's will is seen by ergology. So what I would say here is that actually this doesn't really matter actually if there are only one person in this organization. What matters through the lens of the logics of organization is actually what is the mission of the organization that you are building. Is it something that is for profit and just for profit? Is it something that actually related to public good? You want to educate people, so the consulting you're doing is just to transmit some knowledge or some technical skills in order to people to communicate their knowledge, etc. So it would be more, why is this why is it this organization of this specific type, this specific mission, and maybe actually an organization with only one individual will become bigger in the future and actually be a bigger organization influencing the life of many others. Another question, and the last before the before last question from actually Martina. She says, in week 2 you mentioned different types of capitalism based on different types of logic. Where did you take this division of personal family capitalism? And actually here you have a reading, a recommended reading that you can use either from the book that can serve as a basis for this MOOC, or from other books from, for instance, Patricia Thornton, Willie Ocasio, and Mike Lonsbury. Basically, it's a view from sociologists and anthropologists that consider that any society consists in different orders or sectors, the public good, the private good, the community, the sacred, and always what is related to religion, for instance, etc. And basically you can define any society through 7 of these orders, maybe 8, but not many more. So this is from this source of inspiration that these logics of action are based. Pradip Prasad says, hey, how would you classify organizations like Anonymous or Mafia or terrorist groups? How do you categorize their logic of action? They do seem to have a large following but are classified as antisocial by a few. And so here, that's funny because actually before writing the ergology thing, my former book with Jean-Philippe Verne is the Pirate Organization. So actually this question goes back to something that we did before or reflected before. So if you are interested in this, please go to the pirateorganization.com, which is actually a blog where we post many things related to these issues. So you can follow the Twitter account, which is at pirate.org, or also follow my own Twitter account, which is at rudy.org, if you want to actually know more about this. But there is a big difference between pirate organizations and mafia, and the fact is that pirate organizations fight against states, powerful states, whereas mafia benefit from very weak states. So if you're interested, please go to these websites for more data. Last but not least, before we move to what we're up to today, which is talking with Benoit. Some of you posted some graphs or tables just to help other understand the different concepts that are used in this class, and I would like just to thank you all for doing this. I think it's really relevant, rewarding, and interesting for everyone. So okay, so I think that now it's time to actually take advantage of our guest today. So Benoit, again, thank you for being here. As I said, you come from a medical or veterinary background. You worked at different firms. You manage, and you were and are CEO of firms in the medical or medical diagnosis industry. And my first question to you would be the following. In your sector, actually, and in your firm, you have three logics of action that face each other. You have the professions, so the doctors, the public good, because you bring to society some innovations that can actually cut the cost for diagnosis of some cancers, for instance. And so the public good here is involved. The social security may benefit from this type of innovation, having a better diagnosis for reduced cost. And well, the firm itself, the firm needs to live, and to live well, if possible, from its innovation and all the money it invested in this innovation. So how do you manage this? This logic of profession with the doctors, logic of the public good, just in dealing with the social security, and the firm itself.
Well, thank you, Rodolphe, first for inviting me. It's a new experience for me, and to react on your questions, first of all, I would like to maybe explain in 1 minute what is my company doing. We are in the in vitro diagnostic. That means we are developing diagnostic kits which are used by biologists. When you go to your biologist or your physician, who is taking blood from you, my company is developing instruments, automated instruments, in which the tube of biological sample, it can be blood or urine, is put, and automatically, using reagents, we are going to generate medical information. Yes or no, there is a presence of such a biological marker, or we quantify markers. So, coming back to your questions, in fact, all our interests are aligned between the physician, the healthcare system, and the company, or should be aligned. The physician wants to make sure he's doing a good diagnostic, he's using the right treatment, is monitoring the treatment, so the patient the prognostic is improving. So the medical information we are using benefits the physician. Talking of the second player, the healthcare system, he should also be very positive when we develop new products, because of course we are decreasing the risk of misdiagnostic, mistreatment, therapeutic failure, and also, for example, keeping people in the hospital longer than they should. So there is a big also interest, objective interest of the healthcare system. And finally, for us, it's to develop our company, leverage our technology, be able to generate enough cash to be able to invest in research and development, and also to give our shareholder a good return on investment. But in fact, it doesn't really happen like that. And you mentioned it was a conflict or or opposite forces, and those three organizations, I would say, at the end of the day, are not really aligned. And this is because we are not working first in the same time environment. And if I take the healthcare system, they are more looking at a budget approach than investment approach. They are managing a big deficit on a yearly basis, and their goal today is really to cut cost.
And this
across the board.
This is in France, or this is across the different countries in which your company is located?
No, this is across the board. I just want to mention one element. My computer is running low in battery. If somebody can do it, can do something. So it's true everywhere, worldwide, because the healthcare costs are huge, and there are constraints, and every healthcare system are under strong constraints. So, and of course, if IVD, so in vitro diagnostic, represents only 5% of the total healthcare cost. Nevertheless, the healthcare system is putting a lot of pressure on prices of our products. And again, they have this logic of budget logic, yearly spending, and to put in place a diagnostic campaign takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money, but it is an investment, and you only capture the value a long time, after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And this is a logic today which is impossible to develop and to discuss with healthcare system, because they are under such a big pressure in terms of deficit. So there is a big disconnect, and we have opposite ambition and objective. They are challenging and decreasing prices, reimbursement prices every year, across the board, every year, in all countries, and they are not really open to new diagnostic tools. A lot of my products are sold €1, for example, and they can save a lot of time and money to the system. And nevertheless, we are still spending a lot of time discussing of whether it should cost 95 cents or 98 cents. So, because of these budget constraints and this different timeline, it's very difficult to have an alignment of interest today.
Thank you. I would take now the question that was offered by actually Elizabeth Osaid that we passed just before, and which says, I am interested in the mechanism by which organizations deal with conflict of interest. Obvious sources of such conflict include profit seeking at the expense of employees or environment, or desire to make a scientific discovery regardless of ethical considerations. In the case of medical research, organizational processes have evolved to protect the rights of human and animal, and for that matter, subjects. In the case of profits versus environmental or social concerns, how can organizations avoid such conflict of interest? So this question actually, I think, applies partly to what's going on with in your case. You do practice research. You just mentioned that there are some conflicts of interest and conflicts between the different logics that are pursued by the different actors. So what would you answer to Elizabeth?
Well, it is clear that there are risks of conflict of interest, and it's a fine balance between trying to put borders, to design a framework in which we can limit this kind of conflict of interest. And if I look at my business, a lot has been done in trying to put rules, ethical rules, and it was important to do it in animals trials or human trials, and this was very important. The risk also, going too far, is to sterilize research and development and make things so costly that it's very difficult after for the healthcare system to pay for it, and we go back to the first question. And also for us to be able to invest, or for the industry in general to invest, because it's such a big risk. So we need to have this dialogue with industry and with the government to make sure that we put rules in place which allow us to continue to innovate and take risk. And it's becoming more and more difficult, that's for sure. In some countries like France, you are maybe familiar with the principe de précaution, which I could translate principle of prudence, I would say, which basically say if you are not sure there is no risk, you shouldn't do it, which in research and development is difficult to apply, or if you apply it, you just sterilize again your research and development. So we need to find this balance. Also, there has been a lot of new norms which are increasing the cost of development. So we need to be very careful. We are spending much more money than 20 or 30 years ago in research and development, and we are much less productive than we have been in the past. And a lot of discoveries would be very, very difficult to do today. So it's a fine balance. We need to be very careful.
And in terms also of conflict of interest, and there were some scandals in the US, for instance, in Europe as well, about some, for instance, physicians, doctors being at the same time advisors of pharmaceutical companies, to take this example, and also in the national institutes or agencies that allow drugs to be released on the market. Is this, mixing the different occupations, same people being in, working for some firms or working for the national authorities? Is this something that you think prevents or hinders the process of imposing new drugs or innovations in general by preventing them to enter the markets sooner? Or
this has been and probably is in some countries still a problem. But now there are new laws, also new rules, which are very which are putting a lot of constraints on us. For example, in France, but in many other countries, we have to declare every spending we are doing with a biologist, a pharmacist, a physician over 10 euros. Okay, we have to declare it on a governmental site. So that's the famous Sunshine Act, on which we have to declare any exchange of value over 10 euros we could have with a professional in medicine. So this is important to do. We need to control that because we need objectivity. We are in a scientific world, and we cannot accept those type of lobbying or influence. I am fully supportive of that. Now, again, it's besides this aspect of ethic, personal ethic of those people who are doing those manipulation. I think we need to be very careful on how we put the rules of discoveries, and this also can introduce differences between countries or region. There are countries with laws which are with less constraints. Doesn't mean they allow everything. Doesn't mean they are unethical. They just accept a level of risk which is a little bit higher. So in Europe today, it's a problem in some development to do some development. In new medicine, for example, and this is driving also research to other region in the world, especially in the new therapeutics like immunotherapy, for example, which are very difficult to experiment in Europe. Now you have other conflict of interest, potential conflict of interest, and I listened to the question of Elizabeth. One was around profit seeking at the expense of employee. Of course, there is always a risk. Life is a risky activity. There is always a risk in everything, but it's not. Nowadays, if we want to develop a business, we need the whole motivation of our employees. We need them to be really on board, so you can do it through project, you can do it through remuneration, you can do it through incentive. In my company, we have decided to go a little bit a step further. My company is under what we call leverage buyout. So we are financed by financial private equity company. They are investing they are investing for a period of 4 or 5 years, and then they exit. We have been doing that with 3 different private equity 3 times. And we have decided since the beginning to allow everybody in the company to be shareholder. So I have 440 employees in Sebia, and they are all shareholders if they want. They can invest the amount of money. They have to put their own money as a shareholder, and they will benefit from the value creation as like the other investors, like the financial people who came, like the management, like everybody. And this is a powerful tool. I am very happy we implement that, because there is a total alignment with the people inside the company as an employee and shareholders. It's 2 different roles, and the shareholders, the financial shareholders. So there are plenty of ways to try to mitigate, I would say, those potential conflict of interest. On the environment, I think it was one aspect of the Elizabeth question. Today also there are new rules, new regulation, which I think are very important, and we are totally involved in sustainable growth, and we are carefully looking at the impact of our activities on the environment, and we are going through audits and so on. So there are a lot of elements which are very important to frame and to define the environment in which a company is working. The only really challenge is to have the right balance, because you can really make things so complicated that it would be very difficult. It could be very difficult to develop a company. So we need ethics and good sense, if possible.
Good evening, Mr. Adelus and Rodolphe. We have some question from YouTube live session. One from ID DeWolf, who asks, how do you manage risk without stifling innovation while remaining ethical in your practice? And I believe this also goes with the question that Ratul Banerjee asked. Would you say policy is more of a bottleneck than cost for working on next generation innovation?
Well, policy again is not a bottleneck. It's putting some constraints, but they are necessary. So to avoid people to do crazy things, we need to have rules. It's important. It doesn't. The problem is really the balance, and to make sure that you give enough space to make the innovation, or at least the research, worth both in terms of risk and in terms of value creation. I can take one example. Just one point, in vitro diagnostic, we are quite lucky because we are not directly touching the patient. So experimentation in vitro diagnostic, as we are working on a sample, is quite easy. But even now, to get access to sample is very, very tricky. For the last 3 years, a blood sample, have been considered as being part of the property of the human who gives the blood. Okay, so we need his consent, agreed consent, formalized consent, to be able to use his blood sample. So this is one more step of administration which complicate things, but we can work around it. Now, if you look at research in pharmaceutical, the issue is the level of risk, because it takes years, it takes billions of euros or dollars to develop new therapeutics. And at the end of the day, you are not sure that the healthcare system, because of the constraints, mainly budget constraints, will pay for it. And we are facing today big challenges, for example, in antibiotics, where there are no new antibiotics. And because of the difficulty to get a product registered, people are just not investing in areas where the risk is too high, because as managers, as company leaders, we need to do allocation of resources to a project. We need to manage our project portfolio so that we are sure that we will be able to have a reasonable level of success to be able to ensure the development and the life of the company. So again, it's in the dialogue with the healthcare system, and I was mentioning antibiotics, and today FDA and other regulators are just are realizing that it's probably we have been too far, and if we are maintaining those too tight constraints, we are going to really stop emergence of new and innovative medicine in some areas which are critical. Antibiotics are critical. We have more and more resistance, and it's probably the main risk for humanity is bacteria and virus.
So therefore, I mean, in all this environment with these different logics, different tensions, different constraints, how do you see the role of an individual like you, a CEO, for instance, in a company? How do you see the individual and its relationships with the changes it can bring or she can bring to the world through the organizations that she manages, she creates, she participates in?
Maybe we should. There are two different levels of impact. First, the internal impact in the company. I think it was the whole topic of your MOOC. It's probably the fact that we belong to a different organization. We are looking for a sense of purpose, for meaning in our activity. We are belonging to the global world, but it's difficult for us as an individual to find a meaning in this open world. So we belong to different organizations in different areas of our life, and work is important because we spend a lot of time. So the corporation in which we participate, or the administration, whatever, is a place where, as a leader, we need to try to give a sense of purpose and a meaning to the life of the people who are dedicating their time and energy in a place where they spend the majority of their time. So I would say it changed also the way we administrate companies. I think my perception is that we should manage less and less, and we should lead more and more. We need to give to people autonomy, initiative. Of course, in a framework, I am not an utopist, but we get much more energy and result by leading, by defining the goal, defining the strategy, and trying to embark people than managing them very, very closely. So that's my my conception. So the impact, I think, is tremendous, and I can see it in Sebia, in my company. And this impact is even greater with the fact that we gave to people the opportunity to become shareholder, because they are really part of the venture, and so far we have been successful. So there are people who have been able taking the risk of being a shareholder, so they understand also what is the risk of being a shareholder. They are employee and shareholder. They have been able to make some money that they would have never saved during their whole life or life, working life. So the impact, I think, for me, is the first thing is to make sure we have this impact internally. Of course, we have to define processes, but not too much, because you kill initiative and autonomy. I have very few processes. I am trying to fight. It's a daily fight on bureaucracy and so on. It's a small organization. When I was a CEO of a company of 5,500 people, I couldn't manage the same way I'm managing a company of 400 people. So I am not saying it's a theory of management for every company, but I have the chance to have a company in which I try to lead more than manage, and I have a very good team.
We have two questions for Benoit. One coming from Madan Ramachandran. Dear Benoit, do you see conflicting values and action between sub-organization within your company? For example, research and development versus sales. How, as a leader, you align this sub-organization toward a single cause? The second question calls from Alessandros Veros. I would like to ask Benoit, is the company is creating an added value to the local territories and local actors?
Well, let me start maybe with the second question, because it goes back to the impact of the company, your question, Rodolphe, on outside. Mm-hmm. Yes, what we try to do is really to bring new solutions to improve the healthcare situation of the different countries. We are present in 110 countries. At the same time, we need to make money also. So we go back, but there is no conflict on that. We want to bring solutions to improve the productivity of optimize the cost of healthcare, and to improve the status, healthcare status of the population. And I can give you an example. Recently, we launched a new product in diabetes. Diabetes is a commodity market. Nobody was expecting us in this field. And we have been able, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but to launch a product with not a marginal, but an incremental competitive advantage, which can help the physician to make a better diagnostic and a better monitoring of the patient. We right from the beginning we realized that it was for us impossible to get a premium for this competitive advantage, because the competitive environment is very tough. Again, it's a commodity market and so on. So what we nevertheless we decided to launch, and this is well accepted by the scientific world, and we have today a good development, and it makes a big difference, especially in some region, Asia, Africa, where you have a lot of variant of hemoglobin. It's not so much a revolution in Europe, neither in the US, but in those region, Middle East, Asia, Africa, it's a big plus. So yes, we can have an impact, and we expect to do an impact, and this is also a motivation tool internally. And of course, it's easier when you are in healthcare than probably in other activities. I'm not going to name any other activities, but in healthcare, it's easier because to save people, maybe not, but to try to contribute to diagnose as early as possible, to avoid therapeutic failure, to improve monitoring and prognosis is a motivational thing for everybody in the company. The first question is a very interesting one because it touched to the interaction of the different organization in the organization. And one was mentioned R&D with marketing, with and again, because of the size of my company, it's easier to put everybody around the table to discuss. So we spend time in discussing and in exchanging ideas, perspective, opinions. Processes are helping, especially in larger companies. But I am a strong believer in spending time myself in putting people around the table, exposing them to what is at stake, what are the limitations, what goal we are going after, and after it's a really cooperation thing. If you are able to implement it, it helps a lot. Of course, it could be also that there are opposite forces in an organization, but it's the role of the manager and the leader to make sure that you are creating the environment so that there is no tension on things like resources. I mean, you cannot say to R&D, look, you have a closed envelope, and at the same time talk to marketing and say you should launch 20 products because we need 20 products. So the alignment and the coherence of the speech, but also the strategy is very important, and this is the role of the leader. And for example, every week we meet marketing, research and development, after sales services, and the commercial operation to discuss development, new products or improvement or problems we can have on the market.
Rodolphe, we have a question for you, which is from sorry, I'm looking for the right question.
So just maybe there was.
What is the added value of orgology compared to regular management, which tend to reconcile contradictory logics?
As we will see later in the MOOC, actually, there is no incompatibility. Actually, the way we position orgology is actually like a theory of management, if you want. And I would say a theory of managements. It's a better way of understanding why some managerial practices will work in certain conditions and not in others. So the dissatisfaction that many business school professors have when they teach management is that very rapidly you can just teach bags of tricks. You do this, how to make a change. You have 10 points that you should follow: freeze, the situation, emergency, unfreeze, etc. And these recipes are interesting because they sometimes they just work, but they do not enable you just to reflect more broadly about why is management as a field growing so much, why are organizations populating our lives, how do they define our own identities, provide us with many different values and contradictory values. So I mean, to Philippe, I would say that it's more a way just to take a step back and understand why it's now that this is happening, and probably not in more ancient times where the techniques, the tools, the number, the variety of organizations was not as high, as big as they are today. And I saw also that there was a question, but this time more for.
Yes, I was about to go to sorry. There is two questions actually. One from ID de Wolf. What role does collaboration and networking play to the direction of your organization? And one from Pradeep Prasad. What is the main difference between a manager and a leader?
And if I may, I think that this will be the last, the two last questions. And if we can finish with the one on the difference between manager and leader, I think it would be a nice, finish for the conference today.
We may need more time, huh? For manager and leader. So the question was, what role does collaboration and networking play to the direction of your organization? It's huge. It's what I encourage to do. It's people to meet, to know each other, to exchange, and this is the type of environment I try to create. That people do not wait for processes, procedures, or organized meeting to talk to each other. And again, we go back to the initiative aspect, which I think is a key. Autonomy and initiative for me are very, very important for the efficiency of the company, but also I think for the people themselves, because they really feel responsible. And my point of view, it should give them a good sense of purpose of their activity in a given corporation. So I am a much stronger believer in networking than ultimately in the efficiency of putting in place a lot of procedure and processes. That's not easy to do. It's a cultural thing also. It depends on the different culture, but it's important. It's important to encourage that, and the leader has a role in that. It's to accept that sometimes there are things which are done, or discussions which are going on, or things which are probably not exactly how you would do them, but which are happening, and you thank people to take initiative. So maybe it's difficult to define probably the difference in few minutes. Difference between manager and leader. Probably for me at least, manager will rely much more on again, I go back to process, procedures, and probably will limit the freedom of the people. Try to organize it because he thinks it's the right way to do it. The leader will accept probably some level of chaos, some level of tension, some level of what disorder, because it gives people the possibility, the potential of emerging with new ways of doing things. And I can tell you that moving from my company, where again it was a huge one, 1.3 billion, to a company of 170 million here, I discovered that things I thought were impossible to do in other manners than the one I have done for many years was done totally differently in a different environment. And it is important for me to give a direction, to give the people the opportunity to embark and to contribute at their level, different level. You need to accept that because not everybody can feel comfortable in it. And I am convinced that it's a way you can have the more innovation than if you try to formalize it on every aspect. Project management, for example, is something which can completely sterilize a development. We try to have a light project management, but it's a lot of work from the leader. it's a lot of work from the different head of department, because it's a permanent movement, but it's fun. So I think people, hopefully, I hope my people in the company are happy, and if I see them every day, I can reasonably think it's they are appreciating this. It's a difficult for some people we have hired, or it has been difficult to adjust, or they could some couldn't adjust because they needed to be more comfortable, more reassurance, more processes so they could follow instead of following their instinct. But it's a way. That's a chance to be a leader. It's you try to organize a company along your belief on this type of how to motivate people.
Thank you very much, Benoit, for all your answers to this live session today. Thanks to the people who are with us, in live in this live session and asking questions. Hope you all enjoyed. This has been video recorded, so for the people who watch the video afterwards, thank you also. Hope you will like it. Let me just finish the session by saying that we are in week 3. Week 3 is starting. So the key learnings you will have are related to this time more competitive advantage. So we saw legitimacy in week 2, the different logics of action. Some are more legitimate than others. This can raise some issues for organizations. Now we see the other face of the coin, which is competition. Some organization might be or may be legitimate, but not competitive. And so we need to think our world of organizations through this lens as well. So we'll be talking about competitive advantage, for instance. Remember also that you have to do your peer assessment evaluation for people doing the full program. It will be also time this week in the evaluation to answer another final quiz, but also to answer a different type of quiz. We provided you with 3 different articles that each contains 5 questions. 5 questions at the end, and so it's another way to reflect on the ideas, concepts about the content of week 3, and eventually remember just to post your questions to me and the team, and we will actually send a short feedback video, on February the 4th about answering these questions. Again, thank you all. Thank you, Romain. Thank you, Antoine. Thank you, Vanessa. And thank you, Benoit, for being with us today. Goodbye.